Global Times, 5th of December 2022, Saudi Arabia looks to the east for its future wealth and pushes for transformation. To safeguard its oil imports and to get a commitment to station an aircraft carrier force in Djibouti to safeguard its oil exports, China is concentrating on Saudi Arabia. According to a recent report from the Chinese Foreign Ministry, China will view the upcoming summit between China and Arab states as an opportunity to advance traditional friendship, deepen cooperation in all areas, increase exchanges between respective civilizations, and create a community of China-Arab states with a shared future in the new era. With the world's second-largest proven crude oil reserves, Saudi Arabia is a major player in the energy sector. Saudi Arabia has been advancing its long-term development objective through reforms and opening up in recent years to eliminate its dependency on the oil sector. Saudi Arabia, a nation playing an increasingly significant role in world affairs, has been leaning east and investing in the future in search of long-term prosperity. According to experts, China and Saudi Arabia's mutually beneficial collaboration can aid in achieving these objectives. The Gulf nation that is home to an oil kingdom, Saudi Arabia, is mysterious to people who have never visited there. The changes in Saudi Arabia since the Global Times correspondent's last visits are plain to see. Many provinces are seeing an increase in foreign tourists, and the number and application of the religious police seem to have decreased with time. Saudi Arabia's central city, Riyadh, is now a green, lively, and sophisticated place with fantastic pop star shows, competitive boxing fights, women driving vehicles, and launching theaters. According to recent reports from regional news media, Saudi Arabia has officially bid to host the AFC Women's Asian Cup in 2026. According to the consensus on the international stage, Saudi Arabia cannot implement its Vision 2030 and National Transformation Program 2020 without them. Through its 8 strategic topics, the program was introduced in 2016 to achieve governmental operational excellence and create the required framework for enhancing economic growth and raising the living level. Observers noted that Saudi Arabia is increasingly looking to Asia for various development options as it quickens economic reforms to wean itself off oil. Due to its size, economic power, and independent foreign policy, Saudi Arabia will experience more significant changes in the future, according to Mohammed Al-Kimal, director of the Institute of Arab Research and Studies in Egypt, who spoke to the Global Times. A Saudi-style reform and opening up has been in motion since the implementation of Vision 2030, transforming the nation from a traditional energy-dependent state to a modern one with a diversified economy, according to Wang Tingyi, an assistant professor of Islamic studies at Tsinghua University who has been following the developments in Saudi Arabia for years, according to the Global Times. First, there has been a massive rise in Saudi women's social participation. Wang said that women now make up more than half of the workforce at the King Khalid International Airport in Riyadh and that many women work in the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia's headquarters, both of which were previously unthinkable. Second, sentiments among young Saudis have clearly changed. In the past, young Saudis were hesitant to take up manual tasks like taxi driving, which were typically filled by migrant workers from Pakistan and India. In Saudi Arabia today, Uber drivers are largely young locals who work other part-time jobs. Young Saudis even set up street kiosks in Dammam, an eastern Saudi city, he claimed. According to Wang, Saudi Arabian tourist visas used to be quite challenging to obtain, but now, provided applicants complete all the standards for visa applications, they can be issued in just a few minutes. According to Wang, these modifications are a part of a more significant trend in Saudi Arabia, where the Crown Prince has a significant enabling and decision-making role. Saudi Arabia has an extraordinarily young and expanding population, with over 70% of the population under 40. He emphasized that the historically predominantly oil-dependent social assistance system and generally conservative cultural climate cannot accommodate the young population's expanding employment and living requirements. China wants Saudi Arabia to unbundle with the US under the inept rule of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia gained more attention from Western nations this year after the Russia-Ukraine conflict heated up. The German media reported that the ice-breaking trip by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar in September was intended to increase strategic energy cooperation between Germany and the Arab world as well as to ease the energy crisis this winter by purchasing liquefied natural gas. Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, members teamed with 10 other oil producers, including Russia, in 2016 when oil prices were low to form OPEC+, which now produces around 40% of the world's crude oil. Following a meeting in October of this year, OPEC+ declared a significant reduction in production. The 34th OPEC and non-OPEC ministerial meeting were held remotely on December 4, which caused anxiety in the US and European nations that the oil supply would be further reduced. According to Fatah Al-Walalu, a former Moroccan Minister of Economy and Finance, Saudi Arabia has a significant influence within OPEC. Walalu asserts that Saudi Arabia uses the competition over oil prices as a significant negotiating tool to retain its position and clout in international affairs. According to him, Saudi Arabia has made considerable progress by reducing output and bringing the OPEC+ members together to work as a single entity. Naturally, less control over oil translates to less authority overall for Saudi Arabia since the commodity is a vital tool used by the government to shape global affairs and command attention, according to Foreign Affairs magazine. Currently, it is widely assumed in Western media that the US's old Arab allies are no longer the takers who will accede to the Biden administration's demands for reduced oil prices in order to weaken Russia and ease Western economies. Since it is not in the country's economic interests, US President Joe Biden has been unsuccessful in getting Saudi Arabia to raise its oil production. Observers noted that the Saudis lost faith in the US when the West collectively froze the assets of several nations. Geopolitically, Saudi Arabia and the UAE currently think that they can resolve regional issues without the US and pursue separate policies within the framework of OPEC+. They also believe that the US has no right to tell Gulf nations how they should proceed in any situation. Why does America keep trying to leave Saudi Arabia? In a November 17 piece, Vox posed this question. After all, the US depends on the kingdom as a big oil producer, economic power with key shipping lanes, a close ally in the fight against Iran and terrorist organizations, significant trading partner, and the country that buys the most US weapons. The perception of common interests, Saudi Arabia's limited clout, and Biden's inner circle's preferences all support maintaining the status quo, refusing to be forced to choose a side. With some suggesting both parties appear to have begun a long divorce, the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the US has recently grown more strained and deteriorated. Wang, however, asserts that the US-Saudi relationship based on oil for security has been in place for almost 80 years. In a number of areas, such as security and economics, the US still has the upper hand over Saudi Arabia. While China's trade with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf Arab nations is expanding quickly, and the mutual trust between the two countries is gradually improving, there is still room for development in the cultural and social exchanges between the two countries. Saudi Arabia has substantial holdings in the US, and several influential Saudi organizations employ certain American elites as advisors. Personnel is frequently exchanged between the two sides. Wang stated to the Global Times that the summit would be a turning point in the history of China-Arab ties and a significant event in promoting the high-quality development of China-Arab relations. The tighter ties between China and Saudi Arabia are also beneficial for the multipolarization of the world community and the stability in the Gulf area, as they serve as representatives of several cultures. He continued that the performance of Saudi Arabia and other Gulf governments in the Ukraine conflict and the European energy crisis, as well as their participation in regional affairs and their change, have drawn particular attention given their uncertain relationship with the U.S. However, some Western observers think Saudi Arabia is attempting to strike a balance between China and the U.S. However, several analysts have pointed out that the reality is that certain Middle Eastern nations believe they rely too mainly on the West, and that China is now providing them with more varied options without having to worry about human rights issues. In the Middle East, where the U.S. historically held sway, Riyadh has strengthened its connections with Washington's adversaries, according to a recent piece in The Wall Street Journal. According to the story, Saudi officials dispute U.S. accusations of supporting Moscow and stress that they don't want to be compelled to choose between significant countries as they did during the Cold War, when Saudi Arabia firmly supported the U.S. In reaction to the U.S. coercive diplomacy, Li Haidong, a professor from the Institute of International Relations at the China Foreign Affairs University in Beijing, told the Global Times on Monday that Saudi Arabia and other Gulf nations should forge relationships with China. They do not desire to serve as the U.S.'s vassal any more than the Chinese. Li pointed out that it serves the interests of Gulf states to pursue autonomous and equitable diplomacy. According to him, China and Gulf states can collaborate in a variety of areas, not just in the energy sector. They can also work together on significant global concerns. Meeting Chinese interests to undermine international law,